So you are still listening to the We Are West Ham podcast, and what a couple of days for football. What a night of football news this is to be recording on. I'm going to let you in behind the curtain here a bit. I know me and James normally let you into our production secrets, but we spoke to Craig Forrest earlier in the day on Tuesday. We've now got Dave Chidge, friend of the show, friend of ours as well, from the Chelsea FanCast, joining us to do the opposition view. You normally hear this as part 4 of the podcast, so you will still hear it after the Betway charity bets, but we're recording it just after the intro, just as the news is breaking that Chelsea, it appears, have pulled out of the European Super League, where we saw scenes, as we've mentioned. Tom is over there in solidarity with the Chelsea fans, which is why he couldn't do tonight's podcast, protesting against this European Super League and the greedy money-grabbing move that it is. I'm delighted to say we've got Chidge on with us tonight. Chidge, never backward in coming forward with his views. It'd be brilliant to hear from him tonight. So just to let you know, if the recording order of the podcast sounds a little bit off tonight in as far as the news we're mentioning and when, it's because we're recording with Chidge early on in our recording order, even though you will hear it as part 4. Chidge, wonderful to speak to you, mate. What circumstances? Normally we'd be looking forward to a bit of rivalry, a bit of ribbing between all three of us ahead of that London derby that we both so love. Nothing. Well, we will talk about that very briefly at the end, but just talk to us. You're a fan of Chelsea, of course, one of the clubs signed up with the Super League on Sunday, or when the news emerged on Sunday. It already appears Tuesday night at 7:30 that you've pulled out again. Just talk to us, mate. Talk to us. What have you made of the whole thing? What do you make of them pulling out now? Just tell me whatever you want to say about the whole matter.
Mate, I mean, we need 5 hours on this and a very healthy session in the pub, no doubt. But I mean, I think to start at the end rather than at the beginning. I mean, I'm down in Winchester these days with a pretty hectic job, so I couldn't get up to where I really wanted to be tonight, which was at Stamford Chidge with thousands of Chelsea supporters, but more to the point, or hundreds of Chelsea supporters. More to the point, though, your mate Tom's there, and I think that to me says it all. And I know that there were fans of all sorts of clubs out there tonight, all protesting about the same thing, which I was trying to explain to my wife, because I kind of came in with a bit of a grin on my face, having heard the news that Chelsea have decided to pull out of this Super League. And I said, what you don't understand, why I've been, quite grumpy and also very busy for the last few days, is that this is the biggest thing that's happened in football since the Premier League was formed. And it threatened to kill football as we know it. Not just for us, the Chelsea, who might have been kicked out of the Premier League, the FA Cup, all the things that we hold very dear, but it would have affected everybody. West Ham, Burnley, Wolves, Leeds, you name it. Everybody would have been screwed by this. And it was venal, and it had to bloody well stop. And I'm sick to death of the crooks in this game who think that it's all about entertainment and branding and global marketing, stealing the game from us, because we own the game, not them, and they can do one. I'm trying to keep it as polite as I can. Well, you can see I'm struggling a bit, but they can do one. And I think tonight we've scared the bejesus out of Chelsea, not for the first time. They tried this on with the Chelsea pitch owners when they tried to grab that from us just about 10 years ago. And we stood up to be counted then, and we've done it again. And I tell you, I am bloody proud of my club supporters tonight, I have to say.
Yeah, I bet you are, Chidge. And we were just saying the same thing as we kicked off the podcast. That's what I've said. I've never been prouder to be. It's a strange, divisive time we live in at the moment. And I haven't seen unity like it among not just football fans, but politicians coming together. The future Kings come out and backed it. It's everyone bar these 6 greed, money hungry billionaires. So I'm totally with you on that point. Chidge, what talk to me then quickly. I know James has got a load of questions for you as well, but talk to me quickly about that relationship with the owners, as you've mentioned there, because Chelsea and Manchester City, I would say, and do correct me if I'm wrong, of course, but I would say have a very good relationship with their owners. And, are pleased and proud of what they've done. I think they've both managed to maintain the ethos of your respective clubs as much as you can when just pouring offensive amounts of money in order to and you'll forgive me for this, but to buy success.
Yeah, well,
And I know you've got to do it sensibly, and I've got
everybody buys success. Well, that's
exactly. So that's not
You're
offensive.
right. I'm not going to argue with you.
Yeah, I'm not trying to slant it on you. So I would suggest that Chelsea have a good ownership relationship with Abramovich. What is that right? And what has this done to that relationship?
I mean, Roman, for very obvious reasons, gets a very, very, big pass from Chelsea supporters, because we're not idiots. We do realise that without his largesse, I mean, his 1.5 billion that he's pumped into the club, probably more actually, we would never have. As football supporters, you know what the joy of winning something is about. You can't. I mean, I say you can't buy that. I mean, as a supporter, you can't buy that. Clearly, as an oligarch, you can. But the greatest night of my life was in Munich in 2012. It won't ever get better than that. And we would have had none of that without Roman Abramovich. So he gets a very massive pass. Probably lucky to do so, to be frank. Because don't be under any illusion, whatever happens at Chelsea is got Roman's fingerprints all over it. And I include sacking Frank Lampard in that. It's Roman's club. What he says goes. What he wants happens. There's very little love, having said that, for the board at Chelsea, who are seen for exactly what they are, a mixture of lawyers, bankers, oil execs, marketing people. I mean, Guy Lawrence, for example, his history is in running, he was the CEO of Vodafone. He's run big broadcast networks in the States. He was the CEO of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So he's run big sports franchises in the States. So he is universally loathed by everybody. But none of them will know one end of a football pitch from the other. They know nothing about football. They know a lot about making a very successful global brand and business, but they don't know anything about football. And they certainly don't know anything about supporters or the history or the tradition or the culture of that sport and of that club. Otherwise, they would never have got involved with this European Super League in the first place.
Chidge, if we go back to before Chelsea pulled out, what would that have meant for you as a Chelsea fan?
It's a really good question, James. It's nice to see you haven't moved since you were on BBC London about an hour ago.
Oh, you saw it then?
I did actually. No, because I came in to kind of, try and catch up what was going on, and there you were.
Big TV star Chidge. We get all the big names on this podcast.
Yeah, mate.
I'm starstruck.
I'm going to piss on James's strawberry patch and say, well, I was on there yesterday, mate. So sorry.
He's beat you to it.
Fair play.
Well, I'm still bottom of the pile because I haven't been on there at all. So well played, you two. I feel like star quality oozing out of the airwaves here.
But Will, you ask a great question, mate, because we did a monster show on the FanCast last night. I mean, I was going to do 20 minutes on it. It ended up being an hour and 20 just on the European Super League. And I had some real old lags there. I mean, I think between us, we're talking about, my maths isn't very good, but I mean, approaching 250 years of supporting Chelsea. We had Dave, who Hurry Up Dave, who does the CFC UK fanzine on there. We have Marco Worrell, who's written 20 books on Chelsea. Right, so we're talking about as blue-blooded as it can possibly get. I mean, I felt like a bloody Johnny come lately, mate, in that company. And we all said, if this goes through and Chelsea can't play in the Premier League or the FA Cup, or basically it's all just going to be European, we'd give it up. We'd long it off because there is no point. It basically, excuse my French, pisses on the entire reason why we support that club. And we are not alone. A lot of people, I mean, we're all apparently, I don't know if you've been reading about this, but I mean, you, me, all of us lot, we are now legacy fans.
Yeah.
we are not the fans for the future. We're legacy. Well, there's a reason we're legacy fans, because we understand the culture of the club and we believe in it. And if the club don't believe anymore, then they're not our club. It ceases to be a football club. And if it ceases to be a football club, you ain't going to go anymore.
Yeah.
Do you think how would that have affected? Because this is, I think, it's one of the many $1 million questions, mate. With this whole thing, was basically these blokes, I mean, perhaps I'm giving them too much credit, but they're billionaire, intelligent, powerful, resourceful people. They don't do things by accident. They do everything very deliberately. It's all researched, backed accordingly. This isn't they had the first meeting about this, or representatives from the clubs, in 2016, another one in 2017 when they were snapped coming out of the Dorchester in London. There was no doubt more in between that. They just were sensible enough not to get papped while they were doing it. Now, the $1 million question, or one of them, I find, is if fans wouldn't have gone, would they have cared, or would they have just gone, yep, all right, Chidgey, people like me and you and James and my dad and your mates and anyone of the same ilk, my friends who go to Tottenham, Arsenal, you obviously Chelsea, those up at Man City, blah, 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 who wouldn't have gone anymore, who'd gone, nah, turn my back on it, which several, especially my Tottenham mates, all said that, just say, nah, I'm not going anymore. If that had happened, do you think they would have been like, happy days, because we'll just get them awkward, forgive my French, bastards out my hair, those ones who know all the history and want and expect lots more from us, and we'll just be able to fill it out with tourists who fancy a day out at the footy when they're on holiday or whatever, and just want to see a Harlem Globetrotters style friendly game? Do you think they would have cared, Chidgey? Or conversely, do you think they would have absolutely flipping loved it if fans like you, me and James, obviously we're West Ham, so it wouldn't have affected us, but those fans who've gone and care about the club deeply and who are a voice of the club to lots of fans, you've got a big platform with the Chelsea FanCast there. Your voice is widely heard and in lots of cases, not all, I'm sure, Chidgey, but respected. And with, you know what I mean? With that, how do you see that? Do you think they would have cared, or do you think they would have found it a bonus?
No, you're absolutely spot on, Will. I mean, I've been writing about this and saying this for years, that they want us out. They see us as bed blockers because, you know, we think that spending 880, 900 quid on a season ticket every year is keeping the club alive. Well, that concept disappeared 20 years ago. You know, absolute nonsense. You know, what they want is that in their ideal world, they'd have 42,000 different people in the stadium every other week, you know, who would pay premium prices for tickets, who would spend a ridiculous amount of money in the merch shop and all of that. And we won't, you know, and we tell them what they don't want to hear, and we embarrass them publicly and coat them off in private to their faces as well. You know, they don't want us. And the other thing, Will, if you look at Chelsea's accounts in the wonderful Deloitte Football League, which comes out every year.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, Chelsea's match day revenue is said to be about 20% of total revenue. Well, in reality, 10% of that 20% is corporate. So therefore, people like me contribute 10% of Chelsea's revenue. Now, we're getting into the realms of marginal profitability there. So we are not important as a revenue stream for that club. In fact, far from it. We're quite the opposite. We are an irritant. And that's what they mean by legacy. They want us gone. They want us to be a historic legacy, you know, and that's what it's all about. The money in the game now is made from building your club into a global brand and pushing that brand across the world so that you make revenue from some poor innocent kid in India who's decided to follow Chelsea because he likes the colour blue, who will never come to the stadium. Now, I'm not saying that they're wrong. I mean, you know, I'm very privileged because of the position that I have to know many supporters from every corner of the globe. And I tell you, a lot of them get it like any of us do. You know, they get the culture, they get the passion. They're as bona fide fans as we are, apart from the fact they've just not been privileged enough to either be born into it, grow up near the ground, or be able to afford to go every week. You know, but that's what the club are doing. You know, don't underestimate, guys, the huge and evil, in my opinion, influence of American ownership in English football. These are the sons of bitches who are driving it because they don't understand the concept of British sport. In fact, ironically, this is why so many of my American mates who support Chelsea, because it was different from what they grew up with American sport, which is about, they moved their bloody club from one side of the States to the other.
Crazy, isn't
They
it?
can. because it will make them more money. You know,
had Craig Forrest on, Chidgey. Craig Forrest, the old West Ham keeper, earlier in the show. Canadian, of course, dialed in from Toronto, and he was saying the same thing. You just have their franchises that they pick up. The LA Rams were the St. Louis Rams a couple of years ago. The Oakland Raiders will make their mind up one day whether they're the Oakland Raiders or the LA Raiders or whatever. You had the Texas Oilers who don't exist.
Moved to LA.
Just, exactly. Yeah. Sorry, James, go on.
Chidge, just wondering what's next now for Chelsea fans and relationship with the club. I think I saw you tweet that this would never be forgotten. I think yesterday. What happens now? See, if it is true, these reports that Chelsea have pulled out of it, it's definitely not going away, though. The whole concept of a breakaway league isn't just going to go away with it not happening now. I think it's obvious that these guys still want to get their way one way or another. Well, so where do you see it going?
Well, I've got two answers for this. One is really complicated. So the first one is, I mean, I haven't really forgiven them for what they did with the Chelsea pitch owners when they tried to grab that. I think that, and I said it, to talk sport.
But you still go, don't you, Chidge? I'm not digging you out here, mate. And this is the same thing with West Ham and the owners. So many of us still go. They don't care, do they?
Like Gary Neville said this morning when he was talking about the Glazers, there are lines to be drawn. As long as I can still go and see my team play, it's a decent team. I enjoy it. I get to see my mates in the pub before and afterwards, and basically that remains the same. That's okay. But when you mess with that beyond that, that's a different thing. And the CPO was messing it. We're the only supporters of any English club who I mean, I have a CPO share up on the wall there. That means
What is that, Chidge? Sorry, just for those of us listening or listeners / me who hasn't got a clue what the the CPO is. Basically, are you able to shine any light on that for us, mate?
Can you see that?
I can see a certificate. Yeah, Chelsea pitch owners.
Frank Lampard, you'll be disappointed to learn, but the Chelsea pitch owners was set up by Ken Bates in about late 80s, early 90s, I think, because at the time there are several companies who owned parts of Chelsea, and they were going to try and sell it, and basically to build some very expensive properties on there. So at the time, we would have been homeless. We might have not existed as a club. We might have ended up playing at Fulham or QPR or whatever. So Ken decided once he was able to fight off those developers, which he managed to do, and took complete control of the club, he set up the Chelsea pitch owners. In other words, what he did was he basically gave the CPO the ground, the freehold of the ground, and also the name Chelsea FC, so that anybody who tried to buy it wouldn't own it.
Right.
All right. So if you've got a house, right, and you own the freehold of that house, and somebody tries to buy it, you've got the freehold, so they can pay the money and buy it, but they don't own it. It was a brilliant way to safeguard the future of football at Stamford Bridge forever. And the reason being is because he knew that lots and lots and lots of supporters would all buy shares. So there's about 18,000 shareholders. So anybody who wanted to we all know how business works. Somebody can come in and just buy up every share, can't they? But it's a lot harder when the shares are spread out with 18,000 different people, right? So that's where we are, and it's brilliant. We're unique in that, and it gives us a lot of power. But Roman, when he wanted to, rebuild or possibly sell the stadium, we don't know, tried to get his rich mates to buy up loads of shares and swing the vote. And we formed a group called Say No CPO, and we fought back, and we voted against it. We voted them out, even though they tried to gerrymander the vote by carpet bagging and buying up all the shares. And I think Ron Gawley was the CEO at the time, and he got the boot for that, for screwing that up. So it's really, really important. And I'm really proud to have a share. I'm really proud that we've got that protection. But going back to what this is really about, will we forgive the club? I think that I think we now know where we stand. I mean, I was saying this on TalkSport and any other channel that phoned me up and wanted to listen.
BBC London before James.
BBC London before James. TalkSport this morning. I've had to turn down offers. It's been so hectic. I've been
Thank God you made room for the We Are West Ham podcast.
Because I love you guys. You see, it's much
the biggest organisation.
I would rather talk to you guys every day of the week than talk to any of those media outlets. You know that anyway. The point is that we now know where we stand. I've been writing about it for years, moaning about it for years. People say you're just a whinging old man who's just bitter and twisted. Well, that may be true, but I'm right. I'm right. They don't like us. They don't care about us. They would be shot of us as soon as look at us. So we can't trust them, and we now know that unequivocally, 150%. We know that we can't trust them and that they don't like us. So they put their heads above the parapet, and we've now shut it off. 1-0. Yeah. Love it.
Yeah, that seems to be the. I think as well, mate. We've briefly we touched on this earlier in the show. That for West Ham fans, I don't know. It's almost quite, or for me anyway. There's a strange little feeling among all this, underneath all this, and obviously I hope it goes away. That's my primary desire in all of this by a million miles. But there is a bit of me that thinks, blimey, we won't be the only club in the land and set of fans anymore who look at their owners and have that feeling of knowing 100% that you're just customers. And with the London Stadium move, that it took away a bit of every match-going West Ham fan's soul, and thousands of those who don't go and have done in the past or can't for whatever reason, as you mentioned, that it took away a bit of your soul. And we still go to football, and me and James will meet for a beer. Sometimes I go with my dad, but it just isn't the same, and it never will be. And I think it's almost nice to know that fans of clubs, I know we've got a rivalry, but you're a friend of ours, Chidge. I've got friends who support Tottenham and Arsenal and, Liverpool, all that sort of thing.
I know you're West Ham, I'm Chelsea, but we have a common bond. When you, this needs clear definition. When you are a proper supporter, and I know that sounds a bit, poncy, but, when you've been going for a long time, your family are born into it. It doesn't matter, however you find that connection, but that connection goes deep and it goes back a long way. So you experience the same kind of pain and joy that I do, and vice versa. So we therefore have a bond, and we have a bond as football supporters, and that is really important. I often say this. I said there are two types of people. There are people that like football and the people that don't. And that's actually the real split that should be made. Because what we don't realise, because we live in this football bubble, is there are an awful lot of people out there who don't understand and in fact hate football and think that we're all hooligans and criminals and idiots and what have you. Well, that's not true. So the real enemy are the people who don't like football, actually. So we have a commonality, and I think we find that. You and I have known each other for a while. I've known James a long time. We find that bond because actually on so many things we think the same. That's why it was really important what happened tonight, and actually what's been happening since Sunday. And you've seen the real football supporters absolutely come together as one, and nobody can mess with that. It's a beautiful thing to see what's happened.
And you're going to have, I think you're going to have at least 8 clubs now, Jonesy, aren't you? Where you've got West Ham, Newcastle, plus these big 6, where the fans aren't big fans of their owners. You know what I mean? In differing degrees. And I think West Ham will probably be 8th place out of those 8 clubs of how much the fans hate their owners.
I tell you what, Gold Sullivan and Mike Ashley must be sitting there laughing their heads off, knowing that they're no longer the most hated owners in the country. Definitely.
Well, look, lads.
If you had CPO, you probably would have been able to stop the move to London Stadium.
We had the bondholders thing, which is different, of course. But look, lads, just we've had some, as we mentioned, Tom, normally on the show every week with us, felt really strongly about the issue. Lives not too far away, so went down for the protest at Stamford Bridge tonight in solidarity with those Blues fans, as me and Chidge have just spoken about. Then it's that commonality. Text in from Tom. Sorry, lads, so mental. I've had some videos, but it's all kicking off. Honestly, one of the best things I've ever done. I feel like we've really been heard down here. So that's coming from Tom at Stamford Bridge tonight. So look, I mean, the story is still developing. Manchester City now have told the organisers that they don't want to be part of the European Super League. That is the news coming out of Sky. So it sounds like the whole thing's collapsing, Chidge. So by the time this podcast goes out, it'll all be a complete waste of time, but it's wonderful to hear from you anyway. We have actually got a game at the weekend, our 2 football teams. It seemed before there was concern that it might not actually mean anything at all, because it might have meant that West Ham were crowned champions of what was left of the Premier League after you lot all got booted out. But let's assume, as it seems, that football and life as we know it will carry on as we have known it up until now. And it's an absolutely huge game in the running for the Champions League. We've been pretty much neck and neck for the past few weeks since you had the good sense to get rid of that charlatan Lampard and introduce a proper man and football manager, Thomas Tuchel. But yeah, you've been brilliant since Tuchel came in. Certainly more resolute at the back. Still can't get a tune out of Timo Werner. But talk to me about the game at the weekend, Chidge. What have you made of things on the pitch recently? And sort of talk as we normally would if it wasn't for all of this European Super League talk.
We didn't actually sign this brilliant German striker called Timo Werner from Leipzig. We've signed his cousin, his Irish cousin, Tim O'Werner, who's not quite as good actually. But Tommy Tuchel has been brilliant, and I mean he was a hard sell. As you know, we loved Frank, and we were gutted that he went. But you got to hand it to Tuchel. I think he's possibly as good in some respects as Prime Mourinho was when he first came. The way he's got that team organised, disciplined, playing for each other, he's brought the leadership and the shithousery back to Chelsea. And I'm not a fan of this beautiful football tippy-tappy nonsense. I like a bit of shithousery and solid defending and shutting games out. And I've not seen us be that good at doing that since Prime Mourinho. And that's down to Tuchel. He's been brilliant. Chuck in the fact we've got some great youngsters in Reece James and Mason Mount, of course. All we really need is Declan Rice to complete the team, and we'll be flying, mate.
No chance he's coming. Absolutely no chance.
Don't bite, James. He's just baiting. I'm
not. That's all you're getting out of me. That's all you're getting. How do you see the start of the game going at the weekend, Chidge? Because the last time we played each other, we outplayed you at Stamford Bridge, and the scoreline didn't suggest it. But we've got injuries. We're off the back of a disappointing defeat against Newcastle. Chelsea in form. How do you see it going?
Well, I mean, you're right about the game at the Bridge. It was just nuts. I mean, you battered us and we won 3-0. I cannot for the life of me figure out how. In fact, actually, I remember it really well. Your players are wandering around asking the same question. How are we 3-0 down to this lot?
Yeah.
Quite remarkable. You're a decent side. I mean, I have to say, do you know what? I think Moyes, poor old Moyes, he gets a lot of bad press, but he's a blooming good manager. If you look at what he did with Everton with no money, that tells me he's a good manager, and he's doing the same with you lot. And I mean, I think getting Lingard on loan was a genius stroke. I mean, it's easy to say that when he's been banging in goals for fun every game. But, Lingard was a really good player for United and England around the Russia World Cup. He was like, he's always getting picked for England, wasn't he? So, well done, Moyes. A lot of credit goes down to him. And a lot of credit to West Ham. They're a decent side, I have to say. Newcastle did us a huge favour last week. We now have to capitalise on that, first of all, by beating Brighton tonight. But either way, I've been saying for weeks, I hate the term, but this is an absolute 6-pointer. It's huge for both clubs. And I wouldn't stick my neck out and say it will go a long way to deciding who is in top 4, because I know we've got a much harder run in than you and Liverpool, but it will certainly help psychologically, I think, if we turn you over and we jump, we jump frog you into third place. It's going to be. Look, the reality is, you will know. We've been around the block long enough. This is going to go down to the last game. These things generally do. I think this season's such a hard one to call. You get some really nuts results now and again that put a spanner in the works. Bottom line is, the one that's going to be most consistent towards the end is the one that's going to finish in the top 4. And actually, what I said a few weeks ago after we got absolutely humped by West Brom, which came out of nowhere. We'd won 14. We'd not lost for 14 games. So we're capable of putting a 14-game run together. And I said at the time, after that West Brom game, we have potentially 14 games left this season. If we get to the Cup final and the Champions League final, we will have played 14 games. So all Tommy T needs to do is to put a run together of another 14 games and we'll clean up. Be lovely.
There you go, mate. Well, look, Good, Chidge, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Just before we let you go, give us a prediction.
God, blimey! I, I have no idea because it's so hard to do it, and but I wouldn't be surprised to see this one be a draw, actually. But I mean, then again, I wouldn't be surprised to see you lot turn up and play like Pete Brazil, because that often happens when you play us.
Need a score, Chidge?
All right, I'll go 2-2.
2-2. That's James's favourite, the old Desmond. What are you going for, Jonesy?
I do agree, actually. I think it probably will be a draw. I'm not going to go Desmond. 1-1.
Yeah, all right. Well, I'm going to keep the trend going. I've been saying it for a few weeks. We are due a 0-0. Chelsea pretty defensive. We'll surely be better at the back than we were against flipping Newcastle. So I'm going to go for a goalless draw that we haven't had for quite a while. But look, Chidge, it's been absolutely brilliant having you on, mate. And as you say, I think conversations like this, not that they don't anyway, because they're always friendly, but at times like this, conversations like this prove that, yeah, obviously we like beating Chelsea. You no doubt like beating West Ham. It is a rivalry. But there is that commonality between us, mate. There is that common goal. Everyone's stuck together on this European Super League thing, and it's good to see that the thing is appears to be crumbling before it's even started. But Dave Chidge from the Chelsea FanCast there, absolute pleasure having you on, and stay with us because we've got the West Ham women's section next.
That's a real shame you talked out then, because I've just realised something.
Go on. I'll edit it. Go on.
I'm really glad to see, Will, that you've gone full on Ian Bishop.
Do you know what? Yeah. Do you know what? I hadn't thought about that until now.
I mean, what a man. You ask any West Ham fan if you're going to copy anyone's hair. Bish is the absolute legend. But I must admit, Chid,
that hair so long. Do you remember?
Yeah. Looking at you here now, I've got a feeling that might be me. And I was going to say 50 years, but I thought that might offend you, so I'll go with 30. But look, Dave Chidge there from the Chelsea FanCast, absolutely brilliant having you on, mate. And like I say, you can tell conversation like this and let us know the commonalities together. And I'm glad that this European Super League thing seems to be crumbling before it's even got off the ground. Absolutely brilliant having you with us, Chidge. Dave Chidge from the Chelsea FanCast there. Stay with